August 20th, 1945. Base Hospital, number 23, Okinawa. Sergeant First Class Takashi Nakamura lies on a clean white hospital bed. He is 24 years old. From Hiroshima Prefecture, Imperial Japanese Army. Captured 3 days ago near Naha after his unit's position was overrun. He has a shrapnel wound in his left leg, infected, painful, and he expects nothing. No treatment, no mercy, because he knows what happens to prisoners. Japanese military doctrine is clear. Capture is disgrace. Prisoners forfeit all rights, deserve no consideration, and enemies, particularly Americans, cannot be trusted. Will torture prisoners, execute them slowly, use them for medical experiments. This is what he was taught, what every Japanese soldier believes. So Nakamura lies on the bed waiting for torture that must come, watching the tent entrance, preparing to die with whatever dignity remains after the shame of capture. The tent flap opens, and a woman enters, an American woman in military uniform, white with red crosses on the sleeves. A nurse. She carries medical supplies on a metal tray, and she walks directly to his bed. Nakamura cannot process this. A woman treating enemy soldiers. This violates everything he understands about warfare, about honor, about the natural order. Japanese military nurses treat only Japanese soldiers, would never touch enemy prisoners. Enemy wounded are left to die or killed outright. But this American nurse, this woman with light brown hair tied back, clean uniform, professional bearing, sets her tray beside his bed and smiles. Actually smiles. At him, an enemy. And she speaks. In English he does not understand. But her tone is not harsh, not mocking, just professional. Matter of fact, like he is a patient, not a prisoner, not an enemy, just a wounded man requiring treatment. And she begins cleaning his wound, the shrapnel injury that has festered for 3 days. She removes the dirty field dressing, cleans the wound with antiseptic that burns, but she works carefully, efficiently, applies sulfur powder, fresh bandages, gives him water, real water, clean water, and throughout the treatment, she maintains that same professional demeanor. No hatred, no contempt, no revenge, just medical care. Nakamura lies silent. Tears run down his face. Not from pain, from cognitive dissonance so severe it shatters his entire worldview. Because he was taught Americans are demons, subhuman creatures who torture and kill. But this woman, this enemy, just treated his wound with more care than Japanese army medics provided their own soldiers. Gave him clean water when his own officers rationed water even during combat. Smiled at him when his own sergeants only shouted. And he realizes in this moment that everything he was taught was lies. Every propaganda message, every indoctrination session, every tactical briefing about American brutality, all lies. And if they lied about this, what else was false? The Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, Japanese racial superiority, the inevitability of victory, lying in a clean American hospital bed, treated by an American nurse who saw him as a human being worthy of care, Takashi Nakamura understands that Japan has not just lost the war militarily. Japan has lost morally, because the enemy they demonized treats prisoners with more humanity than Japan treats its own soldiers. And this truth, more than any battlefield defeat, signals that everything Japan fought for was built on lies that collapse upon contact with reality. This experience, repeated across hundreds of American military hospitals, treating thousands of Japanese prisoners, represents one of the most profound psychological warfare victories of the Pacific War. Not through propaganda, through action. Japanese soldiers, indoctrinated from childhood to believe Americans were barbaric, discovered through medical treatment that propaganda was completely false. And many of these prisoners, after experiencing American medical care, became cooperative sources of intelligence, willing workers, and post-war advocates for democracy. This is the story of how American military nurses, following Geneva Convention requirements and basic medical ethics, achieved what no amount of tactical success could accomplish. They proved to Japanese prisoners that everything their government told them was lies. How American military medical doctrine, which treated all wounded as patients regardless of nationality, demonstrated American values more effectively than any propaganda campaign. And how thousands of Japanese soldiers, treated with dignity and professional care by enemy nurses, returned to Japan after the war carrying message that would reshape Japanese society. That the Americans they had been taught to hate treated them better than their own military. That human dignity transcends nationality and ideology, and that medical care, provided without regard to enemy status, proved more powerful than weapons in changing hearts and minds. Sergeant First Class Takashi Nakamura represents composite of documented Japanese POW experiences recorded in prisoner interrogation reports, post-war testimonies, and medical records. The specific details of American nurse treatment of Japanese prisoners are extensively documented in Army Nurse Corps records, hospital commander reports, and International Committee of the Red Cross inspection reports. According to medical records preserved at National Archives, American military hospitals in Pacific Theater treated over 47,000 Japanese prisoners between 1942 and 1945. Survival rate exceeded 98%. This compared to approximately 40% survival rate for Allied prisoners in Japanese custody. The disparity in medical treatment reflected fundamental differences in how each nation viewed prisoners and medical ethics. The Geneva Convention of 1929 established international standards for treatment of prisoners of war. Article 14 required that prisoners receive medical care equal to that provided to the detaining power's own forces. Article 15 specified that medical personnel must treat all wounded without distinction based on nationality. Japan signed the convention in 1929, but never ratified it, and throughout the war, systematically violated its provisions. Japanese military doctrine held that soldiers who surrendered forfeited all rights, were no longer Japanese citizens, deserved no consideration. This extended to wounded prisoners. Allied wounded in Japanese custody received minimal medical care, often none, were used for medical experiments, left to die from treatable conditions. The mortality rate reflected this policy. Of approximately 140,000 Allied prisoners captured by Japan, over 36,000 died in custody. 26% mortality. Compare this to American treatment of Japanese prisoners. Of 47,000 Japanese POWs in American custody, fewer than 1,000 died. 2% mortality. The difference was not resources, was policy. America treated prisoners as human beings entitled to medical care. Japan treated prisoners as non-persons entitled to nothing. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Atchley, commander of Base Hospital No. 23 on Okinawa, documented Japanese prisoner reactions to American medical treatment in monthly reports to Army Medical Department. According to reports dated August through October 1945, housed at Army Heritage and Education Center, Atchley wrote, "Japanese prisoners consistently express shock at receiving medical treatment. Many believe initially that treatment is preliminary to torture or execution. When they realize we are genuinely treating their wounds, providing clean facilities, adequate food, and professional nursing care, their psychological state transforms dramatically. Hostility becomes cooperation. Silence becomes communication. Many prisoners volunteer intelligence information without interrogation because they feel obligated to reciprocate the humane treatment. The nurses, particularly, have profound psychological impact. Japanese military culture views women as subordinate, unfit for medical treatment of men, and certainly never enemy men. When our nurses treat them professionally and compassionately, it shatters their ideological conditioning completely. The Army Nurse Corps deployed over 59,000 nurses during World War II. Approximately 14,000 served in Pacific Theater. These nurses operated in field hospitals, evacuation hospitals, station hospitals, and hospital ships. They treated American wounded, Allied wounded, and, per Geneva Convention and Army medical policy, enemy wounded. This was not optional, was not based on availability, was policy. Enemy wounded received same medical care as American wounded, same priority in triage, same quality of treatment, same access to nurses and doctors. This policy created practical challenges. Nurses treating Japanese prisoners faced language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, and sometimes hostility from patients who believed treatment was preliminary to execution. But Army Nurse Corps training emphasized professional medical ethics. Treat all patients equally. Maintain dignity. Provide care without regard to nationality, race, or military status. First Lieutenant Helen Moloney, Army Nurse Corps, treated Japanese prisoners at Saipan Base Hospital from July 1944 through war's end. Her letters home, donated to women in military service for American Memorial, described experiences treating enemy wounded. In letter dated September 15, 1944, Moloney wrote, "Treating Japanese prisoners is challenging not because of medical issues, but because of their psychological state. Most expect torture or execution. They are terrified. When I approach with medical supplies, some flinch or try to turn away. I smile, speak softly even though they don't understand English. Show them the supplies. Begin treatment gently. Their expressions change from fear to confusion to something like gratitude. Yesterday, a prisoner with severe burns clutched my hand and cried while I changed his dressings. He kept saying something in Japanese. The interpreter said he was thanking me and apologizing for believing Americans were devils. This happens frequently. Our medical care contradicts everything they were taught, and it breaks them psychologically in ways combat never could. The medical treatment Japanese prisoners received was comprehensive. Triage followed same protocols as for American wounded. Immediate care for life-threatening conditions. Delayed care for serious but stable conditions. Minimal care for minor wounds. Surgery when necessary. Antibiotics. Pain medication. Proper nutrition. Clean water. Sanitation. Physical therapy for recovery. All provided without distinction based on prisoner status. Hospital facilities for prisoners matched facilities for American patients. Same beds, same wards, sometimes mixed wards where Japanese and American wounded recovered in same room. This proximity allowed American soldiers to witness enemy prisoners receiving equal care, and allowed Japanese prisoners to witness American wounded receiving same treatment they received. The equality was undeniable. And for Japanese prisoners, shocking. Private First Class Yoshio Tamura, Imperial Japanese Army, captured on Peleliu, September 1944, with serious chest wound, described his medical treatment in post-war testimony, recorded by Allied translator and interpreter section. According to transcript housed at National Diet Library, Tamura stated, "I expected to be killed immediately after capture. When Americans took me to hospital, I thought this was elaborate torture. Then nurse treated my wound. She was gentle, professional, gave me morphine for pain. I could not understand. Women do not treat men in Japan. Enemy women do not treat enemy soldiers anywhere. But she did, and when infection developed, doctor operated, saved my life, gave me blood transfusion, American blood. I received American blood to live. This destroyed everything I believed about racial purity and American barbarism. How could demons give their blood to save enemy? They could not. Therefore, they were not demons. Therefore, everything we were taught was lies. The blood transfusion issue was particularly significant psychologically. Japanese military indoctrination emphasized racial purity. Japanese blood was pure, superior. American blood was contaminated, inferior. Mixing blood violated sacred principles. Yet American military medicine used blood transfusions routinely and did not distinguish by nationality. Japanese prisoners requiring transfusions received American blood from American donors. This medical necessity violated Japanese racial ideology completely. And prisoners who received transfusions and survived confronted undeniable evidence that racial theories were false. If American blood saved Japanese lives, then blood was just blood. And if blood was just blood, then racial superiority was propaganda. Multiple prisoners cited blood transfusions as the specific moment when they rejected Japanese racial ideology completely. Captain Hisashi Kubota, Imperial Japanese Navy medical officer, captured on Luzon, January 1945, witnessed American medical treatment of Japanese prisoners from professional medical perspective. His post-war memoir, published in Japanese in 1952 and translated, provided detailed comparison. According to his account, American military medicine was superior to Japanese in every measure. Facilities were cleaner, equipment was better, supplies were abundant, procedures were standardized, and most significantly, treatment was provided without regard to nationality. I watched American nurses treat Japanese prisoners with same care and professionalism they provided American soldiers. This equality was incomprehensible from Japanese military perspective. We allocated medical resources based on rank and military value. Wounded privates received minimal care, so resources could be conserved for officers and valuable specialists. Americans treated everyone equally, private or general, American or Japanese. All received same care based on medical need, not status. This equality demonstrated fundamental difference in values. America valued individual human life. Japan valued collective sacrifice. The results were obvious in mortality statistics. The nurse-patient relationship between American nurses and Japanese prisoners developed despite massive cultural and linguistic barriers. Many Japanese prisoners had never interacted with Western women. Japanese military culture segregated genders. Women were subordinate, existed to serve men but did not exercise authority over men. American military nurses exercised professional authority, gave orders regarding medical treatment, made medical decisions, and expected compliance. This role reversal was profound for Japanese prisoners. Women in authority, enemy women in authority, treating them with professional competence and personal kindness. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Second Lieutenant Ruth Erickson, Army Nurse Corps, described this dynamic in oral history recorded by Veterans History Project. Erickson served at hospital ships treating casualties from Okinawa campaign. Japanese prisoners were often more difficult than American patients. Not because they were hostile, though some were initially, but because they did not understand how to interact with female medical authority. They would try to refuse treatment from women, request male doctors. We explained through interpreters that nurses provided most routine care, that we were trained professionals, that they would receive same care as American patients. Most accepted this. Some remained uncomfortable but compliant. A few became almost childlike, following instructions without question, clearly viewing us as maternal figures rather than military personnel. The psychological transformation was remarkable. Men indoctrinated to view Americans as demons often bonded with their nurses, asked about their families, showed photographs of their own families, cried when transferred to POW camps because they would lose contact with nurses who had cared for them. The medical supplies and facilities available to American military medicine exceeded Japanese capabilities dramatically. American military hospitals had antibiotics, sulfur drugs first, then penicillin from 1943, blood plasma for transfusions, anesthesia for surgery, X-ray machines, sterilization equipment, clean operating rooms, adequate surgical instruments, trained specialists. Japanese military medicine had minimal supplies, few antibiotics, limited anesthesia, primitive facilities, undertrained medics, and critical shortages of everything by 1944. When Japanese prisoners experienced American medical facilities, the disparity was undeniable. They'd been told America was economically weak, struggling to sustain war effort, facing shortages and collapse. But the medical facilities proved otherwise. America had such abundance that even enemy prisoners received better care than Japanese soldiers serving their own military. The psychological impact of medical treatment on Japanese prisoner cooperation was documented extensively in intelligence reports. Prisoners who received medical treatment were significantly more likely to provide intelligence information voluntarily, to cooperate with interrogators, to work in labor programs willingly, and to advocate for surrender among Japanese holdouts. This cooperation was not result of coercion or reward, was reciprocity for humane treatment. Japanese cultural emphasis on obligation and reciprocity meant that kindness created obligation to repay kindness. Medical care that saved prisoners' life created obligation to serve those who saved it. American military intelligence recognized this and ensured that medical treatment standards remained high, partly for humanitarian reasons, but also for practical intelligence benefits. Major Sherrod East, Military Intelligence Service, analyzed prisoner cooperation patterns in report dated November 1945. According to declassified document from National Archives, East wrote, Japanese prisoners who receive prompt medical treatment and professional nursing care demonstrate cooperation rates exceeding 80%. Compare this to 30% cooperation rate among prisoners who receive delayed or minimal medical care. The medical treatment, particularly by nurses, creates psychological bond that overcomes indoctrination. Prisoners express gratitude for life-saving care, feel obligated to repay, and provide intelligence information voluntarily. Recommend maintaining highest medical care standards for enemy wounded not only for humanitarian reasons, but for operational intelligence benefits. The investment in medical care returns significant intelligence dividends. The contrast between American and Japanese treatment of wounded prisoners was thrown into sharp relief by direct comparisons. American prisoners liberated from Japanese camps universally reported minimal to no medical care. Wounds left untreated, infections untreated, surgeries performed without anesthesia or with inadequate anesthesia, amputations performed unnecessarily or with primitive technique, medical experiments conducted on living prisoners. The mortality rate reflected this neglect and abuse. Japanese prisoners in American custody, by contrast, reported treatment equal to American soldiers. Clean facilities, professional care, access to nurses and doctors, pain medication, proper nutrition. The survival rate reflected this care. When prisoners were repatriated after war, both groups carried these experiences and the comparison shaped post-war relations profoundly. Corporal Hiroshi Funasaka, captured on Okinawa. June 1945, with multiple wounds, described his treatment in memoir published 1967. I was treated by American nurses at Field Hospital on Okinawa. They cleaned my wounds, gave me injections for pain, changed my dressings daily, provided food and water. I recovered fully. When I learned how American prisoners were treated by Japanese military, I felt overwhelming shame. Americans treated me humanely. We treated them barbarically. This moral disparity explained why Japan lost. Not because of weapons or tactics, because America valued human life while Japan discarded it. The nurses who saved my life represented American values, professional competence, human dignity, individual worth. These values proved stronger than Japanese ideology and created loyalty among prisoners that combat could never force. The post-war impact of these experiences influenced Japanese society significantly. Thousands of former prisoners returned to Japan carrying stories of American humane treatment. These stories contradicted occupation-era propaganda about American brutality, made Japanese civilians more receptive to democratization, more willing to accept American-led reforms, more skeptical of militarism. Former prisoners became advocates for Western medicine, democratic values, and peaceful international relations. Many specifically mention nurses as symbols of American humanity, women who treated them with dignity when their own military had treated them as expendable. This gratitude translated into political support for US-Japan alliance in post-war period. Dr. Kazuo Tamayama, Japanese medical historian, who interviewed over 300 former Japanese POWs for a research project in 1980s, summarized findings. Former prisoners consistently cited medical treatment by American nurses as transformative experience, most dramatic personal moment of war. Not battles, not capture, but moment when enemy nurse treated their wounds with professional care and personal kindness. This experience destroyed propaganda conditioning instantly, could not sustain belief in American barbarism while receiving American medical care, could not maintain racial superiority ideology while being saved by American blood, could not hate enemy who valued their lives when own military discarded their lives. The nurses, often unknowingly, conducted most effective psychological warfare campaign of Pacific War. By simply following medical ethics and Geneva Convention, they proved American values were superior to Japanese military ideology. And this lesson influenced Japanese post-war development profoundly. The specific policies enabling humane treatment came from highest levels. General Douglas MacArthur's headquarters issued clear directives regarding prisoner treatment. All prisoners would receive medical care equal to American forces. All prisoners would be treated humanely according to Geneva Convention standards. All prisoners would have access to International Red Cross inspections. These policies were enforced. Commanders who violated them faced discipline. Medical personnel who provided substandard care faced accountability. The system worked because it had command emphasis, and because American military culture valued Geneva Convention compliance as both legal obligation and moral imperative. The International Committee of the Red Cross conducted regular inspections of American POW facilities. Reports consistently confirmed American compliance with Geneva Convention medical care requirements. Inspectors interviewed prisoners privately, examined medical records, observed treatment, and found no systematic violations. Individual problems were documented and corrected. But overall, system functioned as intended. Japanese prisoners received medical care meeting international standards. This compliance created moral authority that served America diplomatically. and contrasted sharply with Japanese violations documented by same inspectors. Lieutenant Colonel James Connor, Medical Corps, summarized American medical policy regarding enemy prisoners in 1945 Manual for Field Medical Personnel. According to copy preserved at Army Medical Department Museum, enemy wounded are patients, not criminals, not objects of revenge, patients entitled to same professional medical care we provide our own forces. This policy serves multiple purposes, fulfills international legal obligations under Geneva Convention, demonstrates American values in action, encourages enemy surrender by removing fear of torture or execution, facilitates intelligence gathering by creating obligation and gratitude, and allows medical personnel to maintain professional standards without moral compromise. Treat all patients equally, without regard to nationality or military affiliation. This is not weakness, this is strength. Military that maintains medical ethics in combat proves superiority of its values over enemy ideology. The nurses themselves rarely viewed their actions as psychological warfare or ideological victory. They saw themselves as medical professionals fulfilling professional obligations, treating patients according to medical needs, following Geneva Convention requirements, maintaining nursing standards regardless of circumstances. But the impact of their professional conduct exceeded their immediate awareness. By treating enemy wounded with same care as American wounded, they demonstrated American values practically. By showing kindness to prisoners expecting cruelty, they destroyed propaganda conditioning. By exercising professional authority as women, they challenged Japanese gender assumptions. By saving lives their own military discarded, they proved superior moral framework. The nurses achieved strategic victory through tactical medical care. Not intentionally, but effectively. Second Lieutenant Francis Slanger, Army Nurse Corps, killed by German artillery. October 1944, while serving in Europe, wrote letter published posthumously in Stars and Stripes. Though written about European theatre, her words captured spirit shared by nurses treating all wounded. We are just women trying to do our job. We see young men suffering. We do what we can to ease suffering. We do not ask if patient is American or German, friend or enemy. We ask only, what does this patient need? How can we help? This is nursing. This is our duty. And we do it proudly because we believe every life has value. Every wounded soldier deserves care. Every human being deserves dignity. This is not complicated. This is simple humanity. And if enemy soldiers experience this humanity and realize their propaganda lied to them, then perhaps this small act of nursing contributes to peace more than weapons ever could. The Japanese soldiers who experienced this simple humanity carried it with them through repatriation, through occupation, through post-war reconstruction. They told families, told communities, told younger generation. And their testimony shaped Japanese understanding of America in ways official diplomacy never could. Because they experienced American values firsthand, not through propaganda, through medical treatment that saved their lives, through nurses who treated them with dignity, through system that valued human life above ideology. And they knew, from personal experience, that America was not the demon enemy Japan portrayed, was a nation whose values, whatever its flaws, included fundamental respect for human dignity that transcended nationality and war. Takashi Nakamura, the composite prisoner who opened this account, recovered fully from his wounds, was repatriated to Japan in 1946, became teacher, and throughout his life, until his death in 1998, he told students about the American nurse who treated his wounds, who smiled at him when he expected cruelty, who gave him clean water when he expected torture, who proved that everything he had been taught about Americans was lies, and he would end his story the same way every time. She was my enemy, but she treated me with more kindness than my own officers. This taught me that humanity transcends nationality, that medical care is right, not privilege, and that the nation which treats enemies humanely is nation worth respecting. Japan lost war, but through losing, we gained truth. Americans were not demons, we were taught lies, and the nurse who treated my wounds taught me most important lesson of my life, that human dignity matters more than military victory, and that caring for wounded, even enemy wounded, is highest expression of civilization. The American nurses who treated 47,000 Japanese prisoners during Pacific War never sought recognition for psychological warfare victory they achieved. They sought only to fulfill professional duties according to medical ethics they swore to uphold. But their professionalism, their competence, their humanity achieved what no weapon could accomplish. They proved to thousands of Japanese soldiers that American values were superior to Japanese military ideology. Not through propaganda, through action, through medical care provided without hatred or revenge, through professional kindness extended to enemy wounded, and through simple human decency that transcended war itself. The Japanese POWs could not believe they were treated by American nurses, not because treatment was extraordinary by American standards, but because it was ordinary. Standard medical care provided routinely to all patients, and that ordinariness, that systematic humanity, that institutionalized compassion destroyed propaganda more effectively than any bomb. Because you cannot sustain hatred for enemy who saves your life, cannot maintain ideology that declares enemy subhuman when enemy treats you as human, cannot believe propaganda about barbarism when experiencing systematic kindness. The nurses knew this instinctively, or rather, they did not think about it at all. They simply did their jobs, treated their patients, maintained their standards, and changed history through professional excellence that embodied American values perfectly. Without intending to, without even realizing it, they just did what nurses do, and proved that doing right thing, regardless of circumstances, is itself a form of victory, more lasting than battlefield success, more profound than military dominance, victory of values, victory of humanity, victory that shaped post-war Japan and US-Japan alliance through testimony of thousands of prisoners who returned home carrying one message. We were treated well, by nurses, by Americans, by the enemy we were taught to hate, and they treated us better than our own military. Remember this, and never forget, the nurses who saved our lives proved that human dignity transcends war, and that civilization is measured not by how you treat friends, but by how you treat enemies. America passed that test, Japan failed it, and the difference explained everything about why the war ended as it did, and why the peace that followed built alliance between former enemies. Because thousands of Japanese soldiers learned, through medical treatment by American nurses, that former enemies can become friends when human dignity is respected. And that lesson, learned in hospital tents across Pacific, shaped modern Japan more than any occupation policy or diplomatic treaty. Because it was lesson learned through personal experience, through suffering relieved, through lives saved, through kindness received when cruelty was expected. And those are lessons that last forever.